In 1878, a family in rural Arkansas faced something that defied explanation. Their newborn cried without stopping for 3 weeks straight. The doctors found nothing wrong. The parents tried everything, but the moment their grandfather clock shattered at exactly midnight, the baby fell silent. What happened in those next few hours would haunt that family for generations, and the truth about what lived inside that clock was something no one was prepared to face. The Brennan family arrived in Crawford County, Arkansas in the spring of 1878. Samuel Brennan had purchased 40 acres of land sight unseen, lured by advertisements promising fertile soil and new beginnings. What those advertisements didn't mention was the house that came with the property, a 2-story structure that had stood empty for nearly a decade. The locals in the nearby town of Van Buren didn't talk much about the previous owners. When Samuel asked about them at the general store, the conversation would shift. Eyes would dart away. Someone would remember urgent business elsewhere. His wife, Catherine, noticed it too, but they were practical people. The house was solid, the land was theirs, and they had a baby on the way. Catherine gave birth to their daughter Lily on a humid September night. The midwife, an older woman named Mrs. Garrett, arrived just after sunset. The delivery was difficult, but not unusual. Lily came into the world with a strong cry, which Mrs. Garrett said was a good sign. A healthy pair of lungs meant a healthy child. But Lily didn't stop crying. That first night, Samuel and Catherine assumed it was normal. New parents expect sleepless nights. By the third day, they were taking turns, desperately trying to soothe their daughter. By the end of the first week, they were beyond exhausted. Catherine's sister Margaret came to help. She had 3 children of her own and considered herself experienced. Within 2 days, she left, pale and shaken, saying only that something wasn't right. Dr. Phillips came from Van Buren on the 10th day. He examined Lily thoroughly, checking for fever, for signs of illness, for anything that might explain the constant crying. He found nothing. The baby was perfectly healthy. Her lungs were strong, her color was good, and she fed normally. But the moment she finished feeding, the crying would resume. Not the typical cry of a fussy infant, but something constant, mechanical almost, like a sound produced from obligation rather than need. Samuel started sleeping in the barn. He couldn't admit it to Catherine, but the crying was doing something to his mind. He found himself thinking dark thoughts, imagining terrible solutions to make it stop. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. Catherine fared no better. She would sit in the rocking chair, holding Lily, tears streaming down her own face, whispering apologies for being a terrible mother. On the 14th day, Samuel's father, Thomas, arrived unannounced. He had traveled from Missouri after receiving a letter from Catherine describing their situation. Thomas was a stern man, a veteran of the Mexican-American War who had seen things that hardened him to suffering. But even he wasn't prepared for what he found. The house felt wrong the moment he stepped inside. The air was too still, too heavy, and that crying, it seemed to come from everywhere at once, not just from the bundle in Catherine's arms. Thomas had brought something with him, a grandfather clock that had been in his family for 3 generations. It was an ornate piece, nearly 7 feet tall, with a face that showed not just the time, but the phases of the moon. He claimed it brought stability to a household, that its steady rhythm could calm even the most troubled home. They positioned the clock in the main room, directly across from the fireplace. Thomas wound it carefully, setting the pendulum in motion. The deep, resonant tick-tock filled the house. For a moment, just a moment, Lily's crying seemed to soften. Catherine's face showed the first hint of hope in 2 weeks. But as the clock's hands moved toward midnight, something changed. Lily's crying took on a different quality. It became rhythmic, matching the clock's pendulum. Tick-tock, cry, tick-tock, cry. Catherine noticed it first, her exhausted mind struggling to process what she was hearing. Samuel heard it too. They exchanged a glance, neither wanting to voice what they were both thinking. Thomas stood by the clock, his hand on its wooden case, his face troubled. He had owned this clock for 40 years, inherited it from his own father. He knew every sound it made, every creak of its aging wood, every click of its mechanism. But now he heard something new. Beneath the steady tick-tock, there was another sound, a whisper, almost. Or was it breathing? The night of the 21st day, everything came apart. Samuel had fallen into a fitful sleep in his chair when a sound jolted him awake. Not Lily's crying, which had become like white noise to his exhausted brain. This was different. A grinding, straining sound, like wood under pressure. He opened his eyes to see the grandfather clock shaking. Catherine was standing in front of it, Lily in her arms, and the baby had stopped crying. The sudden silence was more shocking than any sound. Samuel stood slowly, afraid that any movement might shatter whatever spell had finally brought peace. But Catherine wasn't looking at the baby. She was staring at the clock. The hands were spinning, not the smooth, measured movement of a working timepiece, but a wild, erratic spinning. Forward, then backward, the minute hand racing around the face while the hour hand stuttered and jerked. The moon phase dial was cycling through its patterns, full to new to full again in seconds. Thomas came down the stairs, his nightshirt hanging loose, his face drawn. He moved toward the clock, but Catherine held up her hand, stopping him. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely a whisper. "Something's in there." The clock's door, the one that opened to access the pendulum and weights, was vibrating. The brass latch rattled against its keeper. Inside, they could hear something moving. Not the pendulum's smooth swing, but something else. Something that skittered and scraped. Samuel grabbed the oil lamp from the table, holding it up for light. In its glow, they could see the clock's face more clearly. The painted moon was cracking. Fine lines spread across the enamel like a spider's web. As they watched, one of the hour markers fell off, clattering to the floor. Thomas stepped forward, his jaw set. Whatever was happening, it was his clock, his responsibility. He reached for the door latch, but before his fingers touched it, the door burst open. Nothing came out. That was somehow worse. The door hung open, revealing the brass pendulum still swinging, the iron weights hanging on their chains. But the shadows inside were wrong. They moved independently of the lamplight, pooling and stretching in ways that shadows shouldn't. Lily, still silent, turned her head to look at the clock. Her eyes, which had been squeezed shut in crying for 3 weeks, were now wide open, and they were wrong. The whites showed all around the iris, giving her an expression no infant should be capable of making. Not fear, not surprise, recognition. Catherine stumbled backward, nearly dropping the baby. Samuel caught her arm, steadying her, but his eyes never left the clock. Something was emerging from the open door. Not something physical, not exactly. It was like watching smoke given purpose, darkness that moved with intention. Thomas grabbed the poker from beside the fireplace. A weapon, any weapon, gave him something to do besides stand frozen in fear. The shape that emerged from the clock was roughly the size of a child, maybe 5 or 6 years old. It had limbs, or the suggestion of limbs, and something that might have been a head. Where its face should have been, there were only hollows, 2 deep pits that might have been eyes. It drifted toward Lily. Catherine turned away, pressing the baby to her chest, but the thing moved around her with impossible speed. It wasn't walking. It simply relocated, appearing in different positions like frames skipped in a flip book. Now beside the fireplace, now near the door, now inches from Lily's face. The baby reached out her tiny hand. Samuel shouted, lunging forward, but Thomas was faster. The old man swung the poker with all his strength, the iron rod passing through the shadowy form like it was striking water. The thing rippled, reformed, and then something happened that none of them expected. It laughed. Not a human laugh. Not the cruel laughter of malice or the mad cackle of insanity. This was the laugh of a child. high and delighted, the sound of innocent joy. And hearing it come from that thing, from that shadow with hollow eyes, was the most terrifying sound any of them had ever heard. The clock's chiming mechanism engaged. It was midnight, though none of them had noticed the hour approaching. The deep gongs filled the house, drowning out everything else. 1, 2, 3. The shadow thing convulsed with each strike, its form breaking apart and reforming. 4, 5, 6. On the 7th chime, Thomas brought the poker down on the clock's face. The glass shattered, and the hands, still spinning madly, broke free. 8, 9. He struck again, this time hitting the mechanism inside, the brass gears that had kept time for 3 generations. 10, 11. The pendulum's rod bent, the weights crashed down. 12. The final chime never finished. It started, the deep note beginning to resonate through the house, but then it just stopped, cut off mid-tone, leaving a silence so complete it felt like pressure against their ears. The shadow thing was gone, simply not there anymore, with no transition, no fading away. Lily remained silent in Catherine's arms, her eyes closed now, breathing peacefully like any normal sleeping infant. The clock was ruined. The face was shattered. The hands were broken. The mechanism visible through the destroyed works showed gears that would never turn again. But something else was visible too. Carved into the inside of the case, hidden for all the years it had been in Thomas's family, were words. The wood was old, the carving crude, done by someone without proper tools or skill. Samuel brought the lamp closer. "It will cry until it comes. Break the keeper and break the calling." Thomas stepped back, his face ashen. He had never seen those words before, had never known they were there. His father had given him the clock, and his grandfather before that. How many generations back did it go? Who had carved that warning? They spent the rest of the night in silence. None of them could bring themselves to speak about what had happened. Lily slept peacefully in her cradle, the first real sleep since her birth. As dawn broke, Dr. Phillips arrived, having promised to check in on the family. He found them all in the main room, unwilling to separate, unwilling to be alone. He examined Lily again. Still perfectly healthy. When he asked about the crying, Catherine just shook her head. "It had stopped," she said. "That's all that mattered." The doctor noticed the destroyed clock but didn't comment on it. Small towns learn what questions not to ask. Thomas left the next day. He didn't say goodbye, couldn't look his son in the eye. The clock he left behind, though he demanded they burn it. Samuel and his farmhand dragged it out to the field and set it ablaze. It burned hot, hotter than wood should burn, and the smell was wrong, like sulfur and something else, something organic. As the flames consumed it, they heard the chiming. All 12 strikes, clear and resonant, though the bell had already melted. The sound carried across the valley, and in town, several people would later report checking their own clocks, confused about why they had struck midnight at 9 in the morning. Lily grew into a normal child. The crying never returned, and she showed no ill effects from those first 3 weeks. But she had a peculiarity that Catherine and Samuel never mentioned to anyone. She refused to be in any room with a clock. Not just grandfather clocks, but any timepiece. Even a simple pocket watch would send her into distress. When she was 4 years old, she told her mother about the friend she used to have. The friend who lived in Grandpa's clock. The friend who wanted to play but couldn't come out until midnight. The friend who needed a door to open. Catherine asked what happened to the friend. Lily said the friend went home when the door broke, but she added something else. Something that Catherine would remember for the rest of her life. The friend said there are other doors, lots of them, in other houses, with other clocks. And when those clocks break, the friends have to find new homes. Samuel tried to track down the history of the clock. He wrote to his father, demanding to know where it had come from. Thomas wrote back once, a brief letter that said only, "My grandfather won it in a card game in New Orleans. The man he won it from seemed relieved to lose it. That's all I know. Burn this letter. Samuel did. The house in Arkansas remained in the Brennan family for 2 more generations. Each owner would report strange experiences, but nothing like that night in 1878. Sometimes, late at night, they would hear chiming. Not from any clock in the house, there were never any clocks in that house again, but from somewhere. From the walls, maybe, or from beneath the floorboards. The field where they burned the clock never grew right. The grass came in patchy and yellow, and animals avoided it. In 1923, Samuel's grandson plowed that field, intending to plant wheat. The plow blade struck something hard 3 feet down. When they excavated it, they found the clock's brass bell, the one that should have melted in the fire. It was intact, unscratched, and when the grandson accidentally struck it with his shovel, it rang out clear and true.
He reburied it immediately and never spoke of it.
The Brennan family history includes one more detail, a footnote in a Bible kept by Samuel's great-granddaughter. Written in the margin next to Lily's birth record is a single sentence in handwriting that doesn't match anyone else in the family. The door only opens when the keeper stops keeping. How many keepers are still keeping? That Bible was donated to the Crawford County Historical Society in 1967. It sits in their archives now, available for anyone to examine. And if you listen carefully in that archive room late at night, some volunteers swear they can hear ticking. But there are no clocks in the archive. They removed them all years ago. Visitors kept complaining about the sound.